All right, hi everyone. Today we're going to work on properties of the function y equals ab to the x. So we're going to do transformation graphing. So if you remember, we talked about transformations a while ago, and we have all of the same properties: the vertical stretch, the vertical compression, the pick up and move left, right, and up, down. So if we're going to compare our family of exponentials, so in other words, this is just the group of transformations. So our function is y equals ab to the x minus h plus k. So if you remember, multiplying is our vertical stretch or compression. So a, which we talked about before, is the y-intercept, where the graph crosses the y-axis. Well, we can't exactly say that, especially if we pick it up and move it left or right. So here we're going to define this as our vertical stretch. And remember, that's if a is bigger than 1. We're going to do a vertical compression. If a is between 0 and 1, okay, so like 1/2 or 3/4. And remember, it's a reflection over the x-axis. Okay, if a is less than 0. So if it's negative, we're going to reflect it over the x-axis. Okay. Now again, we did this before, so it should sound familiar to our transformations. All right, so let's do h and k. Now if you notice, h is with the x. That, remember, is moving it left or right, and it's going to be opposite. We've talked about this before. So it says minus, that means it's going to move to the right. If it says plus, it's going to move to the left. Okay, so h is your horizontal move. Think h with h. And again, it's inside the parentheses, so it's opposite of directions. So if it says minus h, that is move to the right. So move right. If it says plus h, we're going to move left. All right, our last one is k. Okay, so this is k. Label these by color here. K is your up and down. So if it says, let's say it's the vertical move. So if it says plus k, we're going to move up. If it says minus k, we're going to move down. All right, so let's take a look at how this is going to work. Now, if you remember before, I gave 3 points to graph. So we're going to kind of take this apart, graph the original, do your vertical and horizontal stretch, then pick it up and move it. Is the best way I can tell you to do this. So let's take a look at what's happening here and see if we need to do all of the parts. Right? All right, so the 3, 2 to the x. So we're going to start with 2 to the x. So let's graph 2 to the x. So I'm going to go -1, 0, and 1. So remember, that's going to be 1/2, because 2 to the -1 is 1/2. 2 to the 0 is 1, and 2 to the first is 2. All right, so now let's just graph the original. All right, so let's put that in orange. So 1/2, 1, and then 2. Remember, we have this increasing graph. All right, so now there's a 3 out in front. That's going to be our vertical stretch. Okay, so we can define that as our vertical stretch, factor of 3. Right, so that means I'm going to multiply all of my y values by 3. So I'm just going to add a column, trying to make my life a little easier here. So we're just going to go 3y. Okay, so 3 times 1/2 is 3/2. 3 times 1 is 3. 3 times 2 is 6. So the blue graph is going to be my stretched and my final result. So over -1, up 1.5. Over 0, up 3. And over, that's not 2, that's 6. Over 1, up 6. Okay, so here's our graph. Notice the stretch. Still going to have the x-axis as our horizontal asymptote. All right, let's try another one. So here we have 1/3 3 to the x plus 2. All right, I'll do the originals in orange. So we're going to do our 3 to the x. So we're going to start with that. So again, we're going to start with this, the -1, 0, 1. So that's 1/3, 1, and 3. All right, so there's the original graph. Now we're going to do our stretch. We'll do that in green. Okay, so we're going to do our stretch, which means that we're going to take 1/3 of our y values. I'm going to say it's not stretch, it's a compression. All right, so let's write that. Let's write our changes. Vertical compression by 1/3. Okay, so we're going to multiply all of our y values by 1/3. So 1/3 times 1/3 is 1/9. 1/3 and 1. So this is going to get really small. So if you notice, it goes flatter. All right, gets closer to the x-axis. All right, then our last part here says +2. That is our vertical shift. Okay, so we're going to go up 2 units. So I want to take my green graph here, okay, and I'm just going to move him up 2 units. I'm just going to do it by hand. Okay, so our blue graph is our final answer. All right, and yes, you can pick it up and move it. All right, let's try this one. I apologize, that equal sign with the x, it should be x minus 1. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to graph the original. All right, so we have 4 to the x. So -1, 0, 1, 1/4, 1, and 4. Okay, so if we notice that we have a horizontal stretch or shift, so we're going to go right 1. Even though it says minus, remember that we go in the opposite direction. So we're going to move that right 1. So all I did was pick it up and move it 1 unit right. And then our final graph would be down 1. That's our vertical. So we're going to go down 1. So the purple graph would be our final answer. Now again, I graphed all the different changes. You don't have to. You can start with the original, then pick it up and move it if you choose to do so. All right, let's take a look at this last graph. Okay, we have 2 times 1/2 to the x minus 1 plus 3. So this has all of our changes. So let's graph the original, which is 1/2 to the x. So this would be 2, 1, and 1/2. So we do have a vertical stretch. Actually, yes, a vertical stretch. Of 2. Okay, so I am going to multiply all my y values by 2, so I get that stretch. So this becomes 4, 2, and 1. Okay, so we'd see it stretched along the y-axis, becomes more vertical. All right, then we have a horizontal shift and a vertical shift. So we are going to go right 1 and up 3. All right, so we can either physically do all of that, but I think what I'm going to do this time is I'm just going to pick it up and move it. Okay, so I'm going to move it right 1 and up 3. There we go. All right, and our green graph happens to be our final. Let me know if you have any questions, guys. Keep in mind, remember that to stay in means that we're going to keep each other safe. Talk to you soon.